This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with author Jim Benson about how to visualize knowledge, work, and process.
Plus, the 3 secret phrases that all leaders must know. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 31st, 2014. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, we ran across this little gizmo on, strangely enough, gizmo.com.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? It's a 3D laser, I should say, laser rangefinder that you mount to your smartphone. I think we've got a picture of it there. There you go. You can see there's a smartphone behind it, and the 3D laser rangefinder mounts on the front. And essentially, it has a little laser rangefinder, a compass, and a Bluetooth communication that communicates with the phone's camera and GPS. So it kind of works like this. First, you take a picture. You can see like an image there. That guy's taking a picture of a building. The rangefinder does its bit at the same time you take the picture. And then, well, I'll show you. Let's run a little bit of video here. Okay, so what happens is you've taken the picture, now there's a little square that shows up and you can drag the corners of a rectangle to each of the corners of the object that you want to measure. In this case, it happens to be a building. So he's dragging the corners of his square into there, and there's actually a little zoom function that lets you kind of be more accurate in how you're aligning your corners. And then what you can do is you can do a kind of a perspective extrude, so to speak, to the other side of the building, and now you've actually defined the entire building. You can see it silhouettes it, and now you have essentially what they call a 3D image of the building, which you can now scan around, and you can export this and so forth. So as you can see, all they did right here was use the touch screen and so forth. And the software calculates the length and the height and the width. It can also calculate sort of the volume based on the rangefinder data. And you get this 3D model, which they call a 3D model. It's sort of correct. In this case, the model is based on grabbing 2 sides of a building. It assumes the building is a rectangle, so obviously you don't have the back side of the building. But what you do have is a 3D rendering of 2 sides of the building, which is enough for gaming, for instance. And since your phone also has GPS, the 3D image is tagged with the GPS coordinates of whatever it is you just measured. So the interesting thing about this is, again, it's just another one of those technologies that is becoming smaller and smaller. Again, the idea of 3D scanning is something that used to be for really expensive equipment. Now, obviously, this isn't super accurate. In fact, the accuracy is, from our standards, what we deal with, quite poor. It's 8 inches. But it's kind of, for us, what was interesting was kind of the proof of concept. It's the idea that you can take something that's relatively inexpensive. I believe this is a $500 item. That you can mount to your phone, and you can do sort of a 3D scan, tag it with GPS coordinates, and upload it to wherever, or do whatever you want with it. A lot of people are using it, for instance, for gaming, to create gaming, live gaming images that you would drop into a game that looks like an actual building that you might see, and you can drop these into gaming situations, and it's 3D. So it's just interesting what's happening with this technology. As we kept saying, this technology keeps getting smaller and smaller, cheaper and cheaper. To us, it's just kind of one of those interesting things that's happening in technology. So
it's cool. What I see is that a lot of these technologies that we've worked with for a while, or that those of us in the industry have worked with for a while, are being pushed down now to the consumer market. And again, accuracies are not what we would expect. Certainly, if you needed to do a highly detailed amount of assembly or something,
sure,
you can use this. But for the purposes of your typical consumer, for gaming, for instance, it's very practical. Now, it's kind of similar to some of the stuff we've seen with 3D printing with the Artec thing we saw the other couple weeks ago with your little mini-me, or some of the 3D printers that we're seeing now being pushed down to consumers. And it's just meaning that this technology is becoming ubiquitous. It's becoming something that people use in their day-to-day lives, which is just going to, I think, eventually make it a broader perspective, a broader impact in the world that we all live in. So, kind of cool.
It's becoming it's a 3D virtual 3D world.
It's a virtual 3D world, man, and we're living in it. Well, Cool. Well, thanks, Dirk. One of the other short feature articles that we ran this week comes to us from frequent QD contributor Arun Hariharan, titled "Questions That Will Help You Avoid Quality Problems." This piece ran in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily.
It's great. This is actually a great little piece. It's common sense, but I really like this one.
I'm glad you said that, Dirk, because that's what we liked about it. It was simple, and it was really, well, yeah, it was basic. I mean, it was about asking the good, direct questions that really are the first steps towards uncovering quality issues. In the piece, Arun covers the gamut of questions and how they apply to quality. And the questions are what, where, who, how much, when, why, and how. And he gives several examples of questions and the answers that can help lead to continuous improvement. The point being is that you want a culture in which asking questions is encouraged, because those are the organizations in which quality is always going to be first and foremost. Top managers of organizations that discourage question asking overtly or covertly, whether from customers or employees, need to ask some questions themselves. Because if that behavior continues, the biggest question really is, how much longer is that organization going to be in business? And I think that the idea here is that, you know, the culture of asking questions and accepting questions is really important. And for a lot of years, for decades really, in American manufacturing and American organizations, question asking was discouraged. I think the Japanese were the ones that really began to bring that in the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Well, for us, it was always still the kind of the command and control thing. I told you what to do.
Do
you know,
it. Don't
do
ask
as I say.
questions.
Yeah,
you know, asking questions is just going to obfuscate the mission. But the Japanese really, with the idea of pulling the cord, really, I think is great. With the idea that anybody, anywhere, is going to be able to lend some insight into the process and help improve it, including customers. And I think customers are more important than anybody else, because, you know, it's a forest for the trees issue. When you're involved in a process and you do it every day, you understand why, you understand the purpose of it, maybe, hopefully, but the customer who doesn't and only sees that output, doesn't see all the inputs, that person is a really great question asker. Why? Why is this way? You're like, yeah, why is it that way? If you have a culture that accepts those questions. So, yeah, good practical article from Arun. I like that one.
And actually, it's interesting because what you've just said leads right into our interview that's coming up here. I mean, you talked about, you know, being able to ask the right questions. Being able to ask the right questions is often being able to see what the heck is going on. So, you know, when we think of the visual workplace or observing a process firsthand to look for waste, we typically think of something you can see like factories or the factory floor. But what happens if there is no real workplace? What happens if the workplace or the gemba is in somebody's head, on their computer? How do you monitor and control and assess, as a manager, what you can't see? How do you see waste? How do you look for ways to improve? That is exactly the issue with knowledge workers and the subject of one of this week's articles. You can better manage what you can see, by columnist Jim Benson. And Jim joins us today to describe a bit about this problem and hopefully some of the solutions. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Dirk.
How's it going?
It's a comfortable day here in Seattle.
Hey, how about those Seahawks?
How about those Seahawks? That's right.
Yeah, it's Blue Friday. It's mandated that you wear something today. Yes, if you don't, you will be shunned.
Well, Jim, first of all, describe, kind of set up for us the situation that we just talked about, where you've got knowledge workers and you can't really see their work. Just tell us a little bit about that situation.
So, knowledge work in general, the workplace, the manufactory of that work is our brains. And I can't see inside your head, you can't see inside my head. And basically, the reason that we lose control of knowledge work is because there is no gemba to go to, as you were talking about. The gemba actually becomes this very ethereal set of negotiations that we've made with each other about what's going to be done, how it's going to be done, who's responsible for things, what the level of complicatedness of those things are, what points we're going to get together and collaborate, and so on and so forth. And when my background initially started in urban planning and transportation engineering, so I used to work on very large projects like building subway systems and freeways and things like that. And I was managing teams of sometimes 100, 200, 300 knowledge workers in many different companies, and everything was a coordination game. In about 2000, I left that and I started a software company. And it struck me that it was strange that all of the problems that we had managing hundreds of people were exactly the same problems that we had managing a dozen or 24 software engineers.
And what are some of the problems, Jim? I mean, if you can just, when you have this issue where you can't really see what's going on, so to speak, what are some of the issues that come up?
Yeah, so let's say that the three of us have decided that we're going to build a thing, a software thing, or a book, or some other mental creative object, and we've negotiated between us who's going to work on what. We know when we want to have things done and what they are going to look like, so we create a spec, and that spec says all of these negotiations that we've made. It's supposed to have negotiated our risk away so that we've dealt with all of the risky items up front. And then we all go off and we start working. And in knowledge work, everything is discovery. We're always learning as we're working. Things are changing as we're working. The level of variation in knowledge work is very high. So what happens is we start to drift. So all three of us are still working. We have a narrative in our heads about what makes sense, but what makes sense is based on what our original negotiation was and what we're finding as we move along. So we start to act based on our observations, which we're not sharing with each other. And so Mike has a set of observations and he goes off in this direction. Dirk has a set of observations, he goes off in this direction. I have a set of observations, I go off in my own direction. It's all incredibly logical to all of us. But since we can't see what's in each other's heads and we don't know what those situations are, then we quickly lose control of the project itself.
So what you're saying is that in a factory situation, you would physically see that somebody was doing that maybe wasn't on target with what the goals of the project were, but you don't necessarily know what Mike is thinking, what I'm thinking, you know what you're thinking, but you don't necessarily know what we're thinking, so you don't know whether we're on, I guess what you're saying is that you maybe as the project manager are assuming that everybody is doing what they said they were going to do, but they may be completely off on another tangent because of just the changing conditions of what they're discovering as they're working on, let's say, a programming project?
Yeah, and worse than that, my assumptions are based on the tangent that I'm on, and I'm not even aware I'm on a tangent.
And how do you bring visibility to a project? What's kind of the solution for this whole thing? I mean, you mentioned that they tried using, in your example, you were talking about an IT company. You said they tried using a Kanban system, but that wasn't even really working for them.
Well, so the Kanban system in the story that they started to use was incomplete. So when we're working with knowledge organizations, be they software developers or be they, people at the CIA or be they bankers or whomever, the first thing that we want to do is we want to create some sort of visual control around the work. And the visual control is based on a value stream. And often value stream mapping for knowledge workers is probably one of the funniest things you'll ever be part of, because everybody has started to work on a project. You usually come in the middle, and they have an idea that they've all developed up front about what that project looks like, and then they've all drifted. So by the time you get together with them, they all have assumptions about how the value stream operates that are completely wrong or completely at odds with the assumptions of other people. So we want to have one canonical value stream, and that value stream can change every day. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but it has to be shared. So every day people could come in and say, okay, today's slightly different, or I had this epiphany last night, we should actually do this. But you want the visual control to be there because it's creating a shared story. that shared story becomes the physical manifestation of a mental gemba.
And how are you actually recreating this visually? I mean, how are people looking at this value stream? How are they visually keeping on course then?
Okay. So let's say the value stream is on a giant whiteboard, and it says, you know, say for IT or software development, it might be business analysis, coding, testing, integration, release. That's the value stream. It creates columns that come down. Work items are written onto Post-it notes, and they flow through that value stream. So we start to make it clear to everybody, especially the people who are working, especially the knowledge workers, that there really is a process, and that process can be incredibly fluid. Again, it can change every day, but as long as everybody recognizes how it's changing, that's the important thing. As opposed to now where it does honestly change every day, but it changes every day via whim and not necessarily anything else. So there's a lot of differences between how we apply lean on the shop floor and how we apply lean to software development. But the key component there is that we want to limit the work in progress, which the board also does. So each of those columns will have a number above it. It's the number of tickets that can be active in the column at any given point in time. And then we can start to balance. We can create a pull system. We can start to achieve flow. And we can get real cycle time metrics. We can get real lead time metrics for knowledge work.
Okay. Well, Jim, you know, we're just about out of time here, but yeah, thanks for, I just found the article actually really interesting. Anybody who wants to read that article, if you go down below the player page, there's a link out to the article by Jim Benson. But I thought it was just really interesting. I never thought about that aspect where how do you look at what a knowledge worker is doing? How do you keep on track of it? Which I think, as you pointed out, is probably one of the reasons why so many software projects end up taking a lot longer than anybody had ever intended.
Well, and it was software, but it was also, you know, it was also when I was in urban planning. The problems are completely coordinate.
Okay.
The problem is that it's very hard to engage in Kaizen when what you're improving is invisible.
Exactly. Now you have a course coming up pretty soon with Mark Graven, right?
Yeah.
Right. Two of them actually. They are in March, and one of them is in Phoenix, and the other one is in San Antonio. And if you go to personalkanban.com or to modusquoperandi.com, the links should be easily findable.
Okay.
To sign up for the courses. But Mark and I are both teaching basically lean management of knowledge work.
Okay, well, terrific. So personalkanban.com, that's an easier one to remember here, since we don't have it up on the screen. Well, Jim, thanks for joining us today.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so long.
Thanks, Jim. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jim. Bye. Good
Great.
stuff there with Jim, and
Yep.
I like that idea. We're knowledge workers ourselves, so I mean that was one that really resonated with us. We have a Kanban board in our editorial
we do.
office, and,
We do.
and you know we understand that issue
Yep.
of tracking the work as it progresses through the system. So good stuff there. Thank you, Jim. Alrighty, well, we're going to move on now to another article from another one of our favorite authors, Mike Figliolo, called "The Three Secret Phrases." Three Simple Phrases All Leaders Must Know by Mike Figliolo. It is right there, as you can see. And that ran in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. So, what are the three phrases, Dirk? Do you know the three phrases, Dirk? And
No, I
kind
don't.
of a rhetorical question. But the three phrases that...
You should read it.
You should read it. Well, you can see it right now. The three phrases that Mike refers to are pretty simple ones, and I think they're good to remember. First is say more. The second is how do you feel about that? And the third is, I'm sure you understand. Those are the three phrases that Mike indicates that leaders should all know. And the purpose of these phrases, which they need to be said exactly that way. Mike takes pains to point that out. The purpose of the three phrases is that you're going to expose what people are doing, what they're thinking and feeling about their work. And the purpose of a leader, of course, is to lead, which sometimes means making tough decisions. So to do that and be effective, I think you need to speak clearly and decisively and listen with equal, if not even greater, intensity. And the phrases that Mike suggests can help get you there. If you read them and say them exactly the way that they're written. So let's take this one by one and look at them and look at what the meaning of this is a little bit more. First, say more. Now, you aren't telling someone what to talk about. Remember, this isn't, again, these are very prescriptive. Say it in exactly this way if you want to get the results that Mike's suggesting. So say more. You aren't telling someone what to talk about. You're not saying, say more about why we had a specific problem with X, Y, or Z. He's just saying, say more. You're involved in a conversation with one of your team members, one of your employees, and there's an issue that you're trying to get to the heart of. You're trying to understand a root cause of. So you know, maybe in your own mind, you have a feeling that there was a root cause that you want to get to. But if you inject that into the conversation by saying,
you'd be leading it.
You're leading it, you're not going to really understand what the employee thinks about that, what your worker, what your team member thinks about that. This is really great for getting to the true cause of a problem and better understanding the people on your team. All these really are a method for getting into who your people are and understanding them a little bit better. So when you say more, and that's it, they will say what's really on their mind, and you're going to get an unvarnished look at that, which is really very, very valuable. The next one is, how do you feel about that? Now, Mike admits in this piece that if any of us out there have taken the Myers-Briggs personality typing exam or the test, he admits that he's way, way, way on the thinking scale of the thinking-feeling axis. He said, I'm 57 out of 60 or something like that. That's pretty way out there as a thinker. So he's a logical guy. But he understands that you can't necessarily think your way to effective leadership. You need to have the ability to feel and express your feelings with your employees and have them express your feelings with them. So when you say something like, how do you feel about that, you're beginning to penetrate into their hopes and their fears, their doubts, their enthusiasms, all those things. So when you encourage people to express their feelings, as we like to talk about, you're going to get to that stuff. And if you are too logical with your approach, you're not going to get there, because people mimic their leader. Obviously people mimic their boss, and even if you are a thinker, and a lot of people in positions of leadership tend to be thinkers, you want to try to get to the feeling stuff too. It's really important to do that if you're going to be an effective leader. The final one is, I'm sure you understand. Again, just say it just like that. I'm sure you understand. And this is a good phrase to use when you're delivering some bad news. And leaders have to deliver bad news and make tough decisions all the time, right? And you have to be able to do that. So I'm sure you understand is a way to give somebody maybe a piece of bad news, like you can't do something that they want you to do, or you can't do something that they want you to do, or that you don't want to do for whatever reason. I'm sure you understand. And it's not, you know where I'm coming from, don't you? Because that engenders really a negative response. Well, no, I don't. When you say, I'm sure you understand, it's hard for somebody to say no. Everybody wants to understand, right? Everybody wants to understand that we're all human beings, even the boss. And when you say, I'm sure you understand, you're going to start that yes tree, as they call it, that confirmation of, yeah, I understand, but that's okay. You can get to that but a little bit, but if you get them first agreeing with you, it's going to be a lot easier for them to see your point.
Sounds a little manipulative.
That's a good point. I read this piece and I thought about that. I said, there's a kind of a fine line between management and manipulation. You don't want to manipulate your employees. And I think that what Mike's saying here, what I took away from this, is that, you want to be authentic in this. You're saying these things, you're expressing these things, not because you're trying to juggle people's emotions, but you're trying to get to their emotions. You're trying to understand what is beyond and behind their actions and why things happen the way they did. So all these statements allow you to communicate effectively. That's what leaders have to do, is communicate effectively. And the core idea here is that use these statements just as they're written. It's going to help you uncover those ideas, those feelings, and help you manage better.
Well, and I think the main thing I took out of this is, if you look at what he's saying, is you're asking questions in a way that isn't leading the employee on, or leading the person that you're talking to on. I mean, and if you really get to the root of it, that's all it is. You're asking a very basic question and leaving it at that. Because it is easy, particularly if, like, you and I do this all the time. Sure. I mean, we're talkers, right? And so rather than simply say, tell me more, we want to expound and expand, tell me more, because we want to kind of inject what our thoughts are into the conversation. And that's the problem, is because it kind of totally then steers the conversation in the way that our head's going, which may totally subvert what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, you have to remember there's already a power equation set up between employer
and that too,
and employee.
exactly.
And you want to try to overcome that a little bit. I mean, you can't be somebody's buddy and be their boss too. It doesn't really work that well, especially in larger organizations. But you have to still be human. You have to be a human being, and you have to interact with people on that level. If you don't do that, again, you're never going to uncover what's really going on. And yeah, we're all talkers. If you're a leader, you probably are a great talker. You probably can spin a tale really well. And everybody likes to hear themselves talk. I'm doing it right now. I love it. It sounds great. Or
We're going for hours.
I feel like a genius. But you can't manage that way. You can't manage your way through that and be so egotistical to think that what you're saying is more important to the person who's listening to it than what they're thinking and what they're feeling. What you're saying is not as important as what they're thinking and feeling. So you have to say things succinctly, let them talk,
right,
and find out what's going on with them. Because ultimately, that's great leadership. And your people are going to respect you better for that, too.
Yep. So, good article by Mike Figliolo, as usual. If you just scroll down or look at the bottom of your player page, you can see a link out to it.
That's right.
Interesting
tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week.
That's right. This one comes from our very good friend, Paul Naismith. And this tweet of the week is from him. He says, this is his pet improvement ninja squirrel. What is that? That is a ninja?
Yeah, that's a ninja squirrel. Come on, man. Everybody's got one of those.
Well,
especially down in the South where Paul lives.
Did he dress that up like that? Did he sew that?
That's right. His wife sewed the neat little ninja pants.
That's what about the sword? Or is that a lightsaber? I can't really read that. But that's from Paul Naismith. His tweet of the week. My improvement ninja squirrel.
That's right.
Exclamation point.
By the way, Naismith told us, and I think this just recently happened, that he was made a fellow of the Chartered Quality Institute, which is I could be wrong in this. I think the Chartered Quality Institute is kind of like the ASQ in the UK, something like that.
Something like that.
So he's just made a fellow.
A fellow, and that's a high honor. I mean, fellowships don't come along that much, and. So Paul, well-deserved. Paul's been a great friend of ours and a columnist for a lot of years, for a couple of years now. Yep. And so congratulations, Paul. Good
and
going
your ninja
squirrel,
That's
ninja
right.
turtle, ninja squirrel, whatever the heck it is. So
all right,
good going.
Well, that is the end of the show for today. We thank all of you for joining us. We do actually have a couple of. We have one. I just want to kind of pre-hype this. We do have an interesting show coming up on the 14th, February 14th. That'd be 2 weeks from today. We're going to have Robert Fangmeyer, director of the Baldrige program, and also one of the Baldrige Award winners from Sutter Davis Hospital, which is just down the road from us. We'll have Sutter Davis CEO Janet Wagner on the show at the same time. So we're going to have Baldrige from both ends. We'll have Baldrige from the director, and we'll have Baldrige from one of the Baldrige winners. And we think it's going to be an interesting show, kind of an extended interview, maybe 15, 20 minutes with both those people on our show. So that's going to be February 14th.
Yeah, and you're going to get a chance to ask questions too. You'll be seeing notifications in your email soon to queue up and start asking us questions for Bob Fangmeyer and Janet and ask a little bit about the Baldrige process. So again, that's February 14th, Friday. It's our heart. Is that a heart right there?
Our Heart Baldrige.
Our Heart Baldrige. That's right. There on February 14th. So check that out. So again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jim Benson, for being with us and providing a great article and joining us on the show. And all of you have a great weekend. Have a great Super Bowl weekend. All of you Seattle fans and Denver fans, I hope your team wins, one of them at least. And have a great weekend. That would be good.
Hopefully one of those would happen.
Hopefully it won't be a tie. So we'll see you all next week. Have a great weekend.
So long.
Bye.
One, fire.